Hello everyone, my name is Fujii Genki. I am a Japanese journalist and author. Have you heard of the controversy over comfort women? Koreans claim that during World War II, the Japanese government authorities abducted Korean and Asian women and forced them to become comfort women, and that comfort women were sex slaves for the Japanese troops. Allegedly, the number of comfort women was estimated to be at most 200,000. If it's true, certainly it's an atrocity. If you treasure human rights, please listen to my words carefully. If you think history should be written based on facts, facts only, not by propaganda or prejudice, please hear me out. I would like to talk about the naked truth without a fig leaf. On this issue, I conducted a thorough research and I reached some conclusions. I will present you first of all the conclusions first, then I will show you evidence to support my conclusions. Here is the crux of the matter. There are 7 points. First point, there were brothels or prostitution houses for the Japanese troops. Those brothels or prostitution houses were called comfort stations. Women working there were called comfort women. Needless to say, prostitution was legal in those days. Second, comfort women were not sex slaves. They were professional prostitutes. This is the bottom line. Comfort women were professional prostitutes. They were paid for their service, sometimes quite well paid. The third point, the Japanese military and government authorities were never involved in recruitment of comfort women. Recruitment of any kind. None of the comfort women was forcibly recruited by the Japanese authorities. There is no objective evidence at all to prove forcible recruitment of comfort women. No evidence at all. Fourth point, with regard to the number of comfort women, there were at most 20,000, not 200,000. The estimated number of comfort women is somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000. Approximately 40% of comfort women were Japanese, 20% were Koreans. So Japanese comfort women outnumbered comfort women of other nationalities. The fifth point, comfort stations were run by private businessmen. The owners, managers of comfort stations were Japanese, sometimes Koreans, Chinese, or others. Sixth point, many comfort women came to comfort stations by their own will. Some were sold to prostitution brokers by their parents. In those days, poor parents received money in advance in exchange for the long-term labor contract of their daughters. This kind of labor contract was legal in those days. Many young women had to become prostitutes under this kind of contract. A few were deceived by evil prostitution brokers. As for Korean comfort women, Korean prostitution brokers deceived them. Those brokers conned young Korean women in order to procure new prostitutes. These women certainly deserve sympathy. The seventh point is that Koreans tried to convince the people of the world that Japanese military abducted innocent Korean and Asian women and forced them to become sex slaves for the Japanese troops. Such accusation has no ground at all. This kind of accusation is nothing but fabrication. Complete fabrication. It is international black propaganda to blame Japan for coercive recruitment of comfort women. It's a false charge. It's a frame-up. Now I will show you evidence and facts to support my observations. First, findings by the U.S. Army. This is the controversy concerning the Japanese military, so you may not like to listen to Japanese. I understand your suspicion. You need more objective evidence, right? So let's listen to what the American military is saying. Here is one U.S. government official document. This. In August 1944, the U.S. troops captured 20 comfort women 20 Korean comfort women and 2 Japanese civilians at Mitkine in Burma, or today's Myanmar. The psychological warfare team attached to U.S. Army interviewed these Korean comfort women. The official title of this document is United States Office of War Information, Psychological Warfare Team attached to U.S. Army Forces India-Burma Theater, APO 689. This is the document's official title. The report states as follows, I quote, first, very important point, first, a comfort girl, this document says, a comfort girl is nothing more than a prostitute or a professional camp follower attached to the Japanese army for the benefits of the Japanese soldiers. Should I repeat? A comfort girl is nothing more than a prostitute or a professional camp follower. This is what U.S. Army discovered. They interviewed 20 Korean comfort women, and this document clearly states that comfort women were not sex slaves, they were prostitutes. This is the truth. At that time, 1944, Japan was an adversary of the United States. 2 countries were at war, as you know. The U.S. Army had every reason to condemn Japan, so you can rely on these words. You can trust objectivity of this report. Again, the document reads as follows, I quote, the housemaster received 50 to 60% of the girl's gross earnings depending on how much of a debt each girl had incurred when she signed her contract. This meant that in an average month a girl would gross about 1,500 yen. She turned over 750 to the master. So this document says, on average, a Korean comfort woman earned 1,500 yen monthly. She gained half of it, 750 yen for herself. Please note that monthly salary of a Japanese army sergeant was just 30 yen at that time. In 1943, army sergeant monthly salary was just 30 yen. That is 1/25th of an earning of her income over comfort women. Again, let me quote. In the latter part of 1943, the Japanese army issued orders that certain girls who had paid their debt could return home. Some of the girls were thus allowed to return to Korea, unquote. According to this document, the comfort women could go to a nearby town for shopping. Occasionally, they could enjoy recreation and picnic. They could refuse soldiers they didn't like. Obviously, they were not sex slaves. Let me quote another paragraph. Quote, the interrogations further show that the health of these girls was good. They were well supplied with all types of contraceptives, and often soldiers would bring their own, which had been supplied by the army. They were well trained in looking after both themselves and the customers in the matter of hygiene. A regular Japanese army doctor visited the houses once a week, and any girl found diseased was given treatment, secluded, and eventually sent to a hospital, unquote. In fact, comfort women were rather well protected than prostitutes of private brothels. Army doctor's visit is one good example. The Japanese army was supervising comfort stations, yes, in order to improve welfare of comfort women. Therefore, many prostitutes preferred comfort stations to private brothels. Testimonies of former comfort women. Now, let's listen to the voice of former comfort women. Their words are most important, right? So, let's look at the testimonies of 4 Korean former comfort women. The first person is Ms. Lee Yong-soo. This lady. The U.S. House of Representatives held a public hearing on the comfort women issue on February 15th, year 2007. Ms. Lee testified as follows. Let me quote important parts of her testimony. Ms. Yong-soo testified as follows. I quote, I was born in 1928 in the Korean city of Daegu. My family was poor and 9 of us lived in a single small house. My parents, my grandmother, my 5 brothers, and myself. I only had 1 year of formal education and spent most of my childhood caring for my younger brothers and doing household chores so my father and mother could work outside our home to support the family. Quote, in the autumn of 1944, when I was 16 years old, my friend Kim Pan-san and I were collecting shellfish at the riverside when we noticed an elderly man and a Japanese man looking down at us from the hillside. The older man pointed at us with his finger, and the Japanese man started to walk towards us. The older man disappeared and the Japanese beckoned to us to follow him. I was scared and ran away, not caring about what happened to my friend. A few days later, Pan-san knocked on my window early in the morning and whispered to me to follow her quietly. I tiptoed out of the house after her. I left without telling my mother. I was wearing a dark skirt, a long cotton blouse buttoned up at the front, and slippers on my feet. I followed my friend until we met the same man who had tried to approach us on the riverbank. He looked as if he was in his late 30s, and he wore a sort of People's Army uniform with a combat cap. Altogether, there were 5 girls with him, including myself. Unquote. According to her testimony, Ms. E and other young women were taken to Pyongyang, a Korean city, then to Dalian, a Chinese city. Yong-soo begged the man to let her go home, but he refuses. They boarded a ship at Dalian. The ship traveled through Shanghai, then arrived at Taiwan. The man who accompanied those Korean women turned out to be the proprietor of a comfort station, where Ms. E had to work as a prostitute. In her testimony, amazingly, Ms. E never said she was abducted or forcibly taken by the Japanese military. In her testimony, she referred to the guy who was wearing a sort of Chinese People's Army uniform with a combat cap. This kind of suit is often called Mao's jacket in English, but this kind of suit was called Kokumin-fuku in Japan during war days. Kokumin-fuku means suit for nationals. Kokumin-fuku was like a uniform for male civilians, not of soldiers. Male adults were recommended to wear that kind of suit. So the guy she was referring to, the guy who accompanied her, was not a soldier. Ms. E left her home by her own will. By her own will, she left home. This is what she said. This is the most important part. She did so probably to escape from poverty, but she was deceived by prostitution brokers. That was very unfortunate. Ms. E. Yong-soo never said that she was abducted by Japanese military against her will. Ms. E. Yong-soo spoke up in many public places, and she was interviewed by media. I know at least 10 occasions, 10 cases. Her account is different each case. Here are 10 different stories by Ms. Lee Yong-soo. There are 10 cases. Out of 10 cases, in 7 cases, she said she was kidnapped or abducted against her will. But in other 3 cases, she denies it. She denies forcible recruitment or abduction by the Japanese military. In 3 cases, she really denies it. How come the story of her own experience is different each time? 10 accounts are incoherent and contradict each other. Can you trust this kind of person and this kind of testimony? Among 10 cases, 10 occasions, the most official occasion was, of course, the public hearing of U.S. House of Representatives. There, she clearly denied her story of coercive recruitment. This public hearing was very much like a court where the accused and his lawyer were absent. Only alleged victims and the public prosecutor were given chance to speak up. There was no voice of questioning trustworthiness of testimonies. It's almost a witch hunt. You may wonder why Ms. Lee Yong-soo's account was different every time she spoke. You can guess the reason. Yes, she was making up her story. She was fabricating her story. To put it simply, she was lying. If she tells her real experience, she must tell the same story every time. Probably she didn't have good memory. In each occasion, she had to invent new story. She was a good storyteller, but she was not a good liar. Ms. Yong-soo was not a trustworthy witness of history. The second witness is Ms. Kim Kunja. This woman is Ms. Kim Kunja, who was the other comfort woman who testified at the congressional public hearing in February 2007. According to her testimony, Ms. Kim's foster father, who was a Korean police officer, told her to go out of home to earn money at the age of 16. Kim met a Korean man who told her she had a good job for her. She was taken away by this man, and he forced her to work as a comfort woman. Probably, her foster father sold her to a Korean prostitution broker. In other words, her foster father received some money in exchange for her long-term labor contract. The money became her debt she had to pay back under the binding contract. Or maybe Ms. Kim was deceived by a prostitution broker. It's noteworthy that no Japanese was involved in Ms. Kim's case. In the congressional public hearing, these two former comfort women, Yong-soo and Kim Kunja, they testified they didn't assert that they were abducted by the Japanese military or government authorities. Isn't that amazing? Ms. E, as aforesaid, changed her stories so drastically, so often. However, on the most official occasion, or congressional public hearing, she didn't tell she was forcibly recruited by Japanese authorities. It's truly surprising that many people still believe that Ms. Kim and Ms. E had been kidnapped and forced to become comfort women by the Japanese military authority. Korean propaganda made people believe so, but propaganda is propaganda, not a fact. No comfort woman so far successfully proved that she was abducted by the Japanese military. The third person is Ms. Kim Hak-soon. Kim Hak-soon, this lady. Let's look at another former comfort woman, Kim Hak-soon. She was the first comfort woman who came out and spoke in public place. In December 1991, she filed a lawsuit against the Japanese government for official apology and compensation. Did she claim that she was abducted by the Japanese military and government authorities? No. Amazingly no. In an official petition presented at the Tokyo District Court, what did she say? Let's look. An excerpt is as follows. I quote, Kim Hak-soon's family was so poor that she had to stop going to school. She did babysitting and maid's work to earn money for her family. A Korean guy, Kim Tae-won, adopted her. When she was 14 years old, Mr. Kim, her stepfather, sent her to a Ki-sen house. Ki-sen is a traditional Korean entertainer prostitute. She stayed 3 years in the Ki-sen house. When she was 17 years old, her stepfather took her to northern China, where she had to work as a comfort woman. Her stepfather convinced her that she could make a lot of money there. In another interview, she said her stepfather received 40 yen when he sent her a Ki-sen house. Ms. Kim Hak-soon clearly stated that her stepfather forced her to become a comfort woman to pay back his debt. She was not abducted by the Japanese military or government authority. She surely deserves lots of sympathy. I feel very sad to hear her story. She was put in the custody of Ki-sen house master until she paid back the debt of her stepfather. From today's viewpoint, this kind of arrangement was neither morally nor legally justified. I don't think that was the right thing. However, in those days, that kind of labor contract was legal. Japan was poor, so was Korea. Korea lost its independence and was annexed by Japan in 1911. It was like Hawaii annexed by the United States. In those days, if a family was poor, sometimes the daughters of poor families must become prostitutes to support the family. That was a prevailing social evil. That was heck of a cruel reality. 40% of comfort women were Japanese. Because of poverty, they had to become comfort women. If you ignore those social conditions of Asia 70 to 80 years ago, you cannot grasp reality of comfort women. Let's focus on the fourth former comfort woman, Ms. Moon Ok-chu. In order to know earnings of comfort women, let's focus on the third comfort woman. Her name is Ms. Moon Ok-chu. Ms. Moon published her autobiography. She lived a life that was filled with many ups and downs. Ms. Moon managed to save up 26,000 yen and sent 5,000 yen to her family in Korea. She was able to do it in less than 3 years during World War II. In 1943, the annual salary of the Japanese Army General was 6,600 yen. The monthly salary of the army sergeant was just 30 yen. With 5,000 yen, one could buy an excellent residence in the central area of Tokyo. She sent 5,000 yen to her family in Korea. According to autobiography, she was very proud that she was a very popular comfort woman with Japanese men in uniform, from rank-and-file soldiers to generals. Here is a newspaper advertisement, recruiting comfort women. The ad appeared in a Korean newspaper, Everyday News Report, on October 27, 1944. This ad says, the monthly salary of a comfort woman is more than 300 yen, and one can borrow advance of money up to 3,000 yen. Definitely, comfort women were professional prostitutes. They were not sex slaves. When the monthly salary of a Japanese army sergeant was 30 yen, one comfort woman could earn 300 yen monthly. How can you call her sex slave? So, what should be the conclusion after examining testimonies of former comfort women? In order to be objective, let's not listen to Japanese scholar. Let's listen to a reliable historian of South Korea. Why not? In 1992, 50 scholars of South Korea formed a research group to interview former comfort women. The leader of this group was Professor Byong-jick of Seoul University. Professor An was one of the principal authorities of modern Korean history. He had produced many empirical studies. Professor An wanted to conduct the research carefully so that it would stand up to verification of historians. But some activists opposed his academic approach, and Professor An eventually resigned this research group. December 6, year 2006, Professor An appeared on Korean TV, MBC, and said, I quote, this is the words of Professor An, I quote, some former comfort women have stated that they were recruited by force. However, there is not even one objective source in South Korea and Japan that supports their claims. And I quote again, there are red light districts in today's South Korea, where many current comfort women are working. Obviously, that is not the result of coercion. We had better conduct research to find why this phenomenon occurs, unquote. Some Koreans became furious with Professor An, but he didn't take back his words. He's a courageous man. In March 2007, Professor Shimada Youichi of Fukui Prefectural University of Japan interviewed Professor An. He commented as follows, to the best of my knowledge, no sources exist proving that the Japanese military authority abducted women and forced them to serve as comfort women. That was an era in which many girls of poor families must become prostitutes. There was no need for coercive recruitment of comfort women. There is no evidence to prove official coercion. That is a fact. I cannot deny it. Unquote. This is the conclusion. Yoshida's fake book. Next, I have to talk about one Japanese liar. His name is Yoshida Seiji. Yoshida published his book My War Crimes in 1983. His book is often quoted as source material of coercive recruitment of comfort women. In his book, Yoshida stated that he abducted 205 young Korean women and forced them to become comfort women against their will. He also said he did it on Jeju Island of South Korea in 1943. Yoshida's age is this guy, and his book, My War Crimes in Japanese, is this book, published in 1983. And Jeju Island is this island. However, Yoshida's book was eventually proved to be false and fiction as a whole. Yoshida told a falsehood. He was a communist, and he ran for local assembly as a party member of Japan Communist Party. Yoshida's book was translated into Korean in 1989. That caused a sensation in South Korea. Only after publishing Yoshida's book in South Korea, South Koreans started talking about coercive recruitment of comfort women. It was a South Korean journalist who proved that Yoshida's book was false. That was Ms. Ho Yong-soo of the Jeju newspaper. Ms. Ho conducted her own investigation on this issue, and her report was published on the Jeju newspaper dated August 4, 1989. She interviewed many elders of the island, Jeju Island, and concluded as follows. I quote, "Yoshida's book is sheer nonsense. The island residents completely denied Yoshida's account." Unquote. Yoshida didn't capture any woman. Later, Professor Hata Ikuhiko of Takushoku University questioned Yoshida repeatedly. Finally, Yoshida admitted to Professor Hata that his tale was fiction. Professor Hata is a well-known historian for his empirical research. You may wonder why Yoshida told such a lie. Yoshida was a professional liar. His book sold so well because he told such sensational stories, sensational lies. He appeared on TV so many times. Repeatedly he was invited to South Korea for his fake apology and confession. He became famous and he made money. The United Nations Coomara-swamy report. However, a horrible thing took place. The U.S. Congressional Resolution on Comfort Women in July 2007 cited Yoshida's book as a source and accused Japan for coercive recruitment of comfort women. Moreover, one United Nations report accepted Yoshida's book, Yoshida's made-up story as truth. This UN report is called the Coomara-swamy report in short. In 1994, the UN Commission on Human Rights appointed Radhika Coomara-swamy, a Sri Lanka citizen, to submit a report on comfort women controversy. In 1996, Ms. Coomara-swamy submitted the report. The official title of this report is A Report on the Mission to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the Republic of Korea, and Japan on the issue of military sexual slavery in wartime. Ms. Coomara-swamy ignored empirical research. In the first chapter of the report, she defined comfort women as military sex slaves. She jumped to conclusions from evil will and preoccupation. Irrational dogmatism dominates this report. With regard to the Coomara-swamy report, rational empirical research is totally ignored. The United Nations is a very liberal biased institution, but Coomara-swamy report is nothing but an outcome of anti-Japan racism. This report has so many defects. Let me point out just two of them. The first defect, Ms. Coomara-swamy writes falsehood about Professor Hata's testimony. Professor Hata told Ms. Coomara-swamy very clearly that there were no employer-employee relations between the Japanese military and the comfort women by showing records of interviews with comfort women. But the Coomara-swamy report writes that Dr. Hata also believes that most comfort women were under contract with the Japanese army. It's a lie, isn't that terrible? Ms. Coomara-swamy is a liar. Professor Hata, of course, protested against the UN, but his protest was in vain. The second defect. The second chapter of Coomara-swamy report determines the historical facts about comfort women. In this chapter, there are 11 footnotes. 10 notes cite one book, George Hick's The Comfort Women. Out of 11 footnotes, one footnote cites Yoshida Seiji's book as evidence. This proves enough that the Coomara-swamy report is all rubbish. The credibility of Coomara-swamy report also depends on George Hick's book. George Hicks was a Hong Kong-based Australian economist. He cannot read Japanese nor Korean. Therefore, he was not able to read primary sources and most of the literature on this subject. He depended on translated English materials. He acquired 80% of his materials from a Korean woman residing in Japan. Ms. Ho of the Jeju newspaper had demonstrated that Yoshida's book was fabrication. But Hicks didn't know it. Probably unintentionally, Hicks was manipulated by North Korea. That's my guess. The materials that Hicks quotes are nothing but gatherings of unverified rumors. From a historian's viewpoint, Hicks' book is worthless. Hicks' book is worthless. It means Coomara-swamy report is rubbish. Worthless too. It's a slipshod piece of work. By the way, Coomara-swamy, as Hicks, can read neither Korean nor Japanese. Ms. Coomara-swamy deserves more criticism because in Coomara-swamy report, she adopted North Korean propaganda as a fact. North Korea is an infamous dictatorial state, as you know. When Ms. Coomara-swamy visited North Korea, its government told her as follows, I quote, "Japan used force to recruit 200,000 Korean women as sex slaves, subjected them to brutal sexual abuse, and then killed most of them. Unquote. These false accusations are presented in Coomara-swamy report as the official stance of the North Korean government. Coomara-swamy stands hand in hand with the North Korean dictator. Can you trust this kind of report and this kind of person? The Kono statement. You have already grasped the essence of comfort women issue. Then you may ask me a question. How come the Japanese government admitted coercive recruitment of comfort women and apologized? That's a big question. I'll answer. That was a grave mistake of one coward Japanese politician. His name is Kono Yohei. This guy. Kono was the chief cabinet secretary of the Miyazawa cabinet. On August 4th, 1993, just a few days before the end of the Miyazawa cabinet, Kono issued his personal statement. The Japanese government had formed a research group to investigate the comfort women issue. The group conducted a complete research of the Japanese government's documents. The investigation discovered no evidence of official coercion. The investigation discovered no evidence of official coercion. The government and military organizations' bureaucracies cannot function without documents. If there was official coercion of comfort women, there must be documents that ordered coercion. However, the research group couldn't find even one piece of document that proved official coercion, and there was no credible witness to confirm coercive recruitment of comfort women. Kono, notwithstanding, admitted official coercion. The reason was mounting political pressure from South Korea. South Korean government high-handedly demanded that the Japanese government should acknowledge official coercion and apologize. The Miyazawa cabinet should have announced that there was no official coercion as a conclusion of its research. But the Miyazawa cabinet surrendered to political pressure from South Korea. Prime Minister Miyazawa had apologized to South Korea already. There were no valid documents to demonstrate coercion. Therefore, the research group cited the testimonies of former comfort women as only evidence of coercion. But the research group didn't cross-examine and verify their testimonies. As Professor An of Seoul University said, Those testimonies are very inconsistent and not reliable at all. Anyway, the Miyazawa cabinet deceived people, and its chief cabinet secretary, Kono, betrayed Japan. Let me read the most important part of the Kono statement. Quote, "The government study has revealed that in many cases, comfort women were recruited against their own will, through coaxing, coercion, etc., and that at times administrative or military personnel directly took part in the recruitments." This is the most important part of the Kono statement. The Kono statement was Chief Cabinet Secretary's personal statement. It was not even cabinet resolution, and the words are rather ambiguous. If you read carefully, the Kono statement does not declare that Japanese government and the military authorities directly took part in coercive recruitment of comfort women. However, with the Kono statement, it is generally understood that the Japanese government admitted official coercion of comfort women. In fact, for those who accuse Japan, the Kono statement now is ironically the only evidence of government's coercion. In 1997, Japanese journalist Sakurai Yoshiko interviewed Ishihara Nobuo, who was vice cabinet secretary under Kono. In the interview, Ishihara confessed as follows, quote, "We could not find any evidence at all to prove coercive recruitment of comfort women by the Japanese government and the military authorities. We tried to find in vain testimonies of coercive recruiters. Then we decided to adopt the interviews of 16 comfort women we conducted in Seoul as only evidence of official coercion. We didn't cross-examine or verify those testimonies. By admitting official coercive recruitment, we thought we did South Korea a great favor. We treasured friendly relations between Japan and South Korea that much." Unquote. The Miyazawa cabinet treasured bilateral relations with South Korea and disgraced Japan. The military and prostitution. Almost every nation was involved in charge of facilities similar to Japanese comfort stations. Many countries had facilities that enabled soldiers to satisfy their sexual needs while they were stationed on foreign soil. In other words, Japan was not only a country that possessed facilities such as comfort stations. American troops and Korean troops are no exceptions either. During the Vietnam War, sexual services offered by Vietnamese women were extremely popular. Moreover, official military brothels were established within each division's camp of the U.S. Army. South Korea deployed its troops in South Vietnam during the Vietnam War. Korean troops enjoyed sexual services of Vietnamese prostitutes. Furthermore, Korean prostitution brokers established their own brothels in South Vietnam. Vietnamese as well as Korean prostitutes worked in those brothels. In the United States of America, Vietnam War veterans must know these facts. Japanese Army's comfort stations were like brothels in South Vietnam. During the Korean War, South Korean government established 4 official brothels for U.S. troops. Let me show you an interesting Korean newspaper article dated August 31st, 1939. This is an article of Dong-A-ilbo, or the East Asian Daily News. This article reveals that 45 evil Korean job brokers kidnapped more than 100 young rural women and sold them to Manchuria, and that detectives of the Korean police arrived in Manchuria to rescue those victims. There are many similar incidents like this. In those days, more than half of the policemen in Korea were Japanese, because Japan was governing the Korean peninsula since 1911. The policemen, Japanese as well as ethnic Korean, were trying hard to save abducted women. The Japanese government did its best to rescue kidnapped women and to crack down upon evil prostitution brokers. Reality was quite opposite of a fabricated image. On compensation and apology. In 1965, Japan and South Korea concluded Japan-South Korea Basic Treaty. With this treaty, Japan paid extensive once and for all reparations to South Korea. The treaty determined that These funds were to settle all possible claims of South Koreans, including former comfort women. In fact, during diplomatic negotiation for the treaty, the South Korean government didn't propose the issue of comfort women. Around 1965, politicians of South Korea knew that comfort women were just prostitutes, not sex slaves. If the case of comfort women had been such unhumanitarian atrocity, I don't understand why Koreans didn't propose this issue during the diplomatic negotiation of Japan-South Korea Basic Treaty. As I said, South Koreans started criticizing Japan because of comfort women issue only after publishing of Yoshida Seiji's translated book in 1989. As for reparations, it really depended on the South Korean government how to distribute these funds. If comfort women deserve any economic compensation, it's really up to the South Korean government that should be responsible for compensation. However, Japan established a foundation to pay more compensation to former comfort women, and they received money. Because of the Japan-South Korea Basic Treaty, the Japanese government couldn't make direct payment to Koreans. Therefore, the special foundation was established. Furthermore, the Japanese Prime Ministers apologized quite a few times. Not just Prime Minister Miyazawa apologized. Also, in 2007, Prime Minister Abe expressed feelings of grief and sympathy for comfort women. Prime Minister Abe didn't apologize for what Japan didn't do. What Japan didn't do was official coercive recruitment of comfort women, of course. But we know being a comfort woman was not a pleasant experience which one can be proud of. Comfort women, they deserve sympathy. Prime Minister Abe dedicated graceful words of consolation for former comfort women from humanitarian viewpoint. Wasn't that enough? How lies became truth. One question arises. How come former comfort women told so many lies? There must be some reasons. First, they couldn't tell the real reason to become comfort women or prostitutes. Nobody wants to say, hey, my family was so poor, so my parents sold me to a brothel. Nobody wants to say that. It is more convenient to say, oh, one day a bunch of Japanese soldiers rushed into my house, they abducted me, and they forced me to become a comfort woman. I was a victim. By claiming so, they can win sympathy and money. What a convenient lie. Second reason. Few people have enough courage to verify and cross-examine words of former comfort women. Professor An of Seoul University had that exceptional courage. Former comfort women are old ladies. They shout and cry, hey, we were victims, we were sex slaves. Many hesitate to ask them hard questions. Therefore, their lies easily pass as truth. This is a dirty psychological trick to refuse empirical research and verification. Many people are still being conned by Korean propaganda. Third, we need to pay attention to a certain aspect of Korean culture. That's about lying and perjury. Again, I would like to avoid ethnocentric bias, so let's listen to a reliable man, reliable person. He's the editor-in-chief of the Chosun-Ilbo, or the Korean Daily News, a major newspaper of South Korea. The editor-in-chief of Chosun-Ilbo wrote the following editorial in his newspaper dated March 16, 2012. The title is Lying Politicians and Lying People, and it's about perjury and calumny. Let me explain. Perjury is the offense of willfully telling an untruth or making misrepresentation under oath. Calumny is the offense of making false statements about someone in order to damage his or her reputation. The editorial reads as follows, quote, Year 2010, in Korea, people indicted because of perjury were 66 times more than those in Japan. 66 times more than those in Japan. Considering that Japanese population is 2.5 times bigger than South Korean population, The frequency of perjury in South Korea is 165 times more than in Japan, and also the frequency of calumny in South Korea is 305 times more than in Japan, unquote. The editor-in-chief of the Korean Daily News, of course, deplores such lying culture of South Korea. It's an objective observation. It's one aspect of Korean culture. By fabricating history about comfort women, in fact, Koreans are disgracing themselves. It's truly tragic that Koreans are not aware of it. Comfort women for American troops. After Japan lost World War II in 1945, forces of the United Nations, mainly American troops, occupied Japan. Before arrival of the U.S. troops, the U.S. government demanded that Japanese government should make facilities to satisfy sexual needs of American soldiers. The Japanese government followed the order and established facilities or prostitution houses under the name of Recreation and Amusement Association, R.A.A. in short. Japan surrendered to the United Nations on August 15, 1945. Only 3 days after the capitulation, R.A.A. was founded. Recreation and Amusement Association was called in Japanese Special Comfort Facility Association. These facilities were exactly like comfort stations of the Japanese military. At its peak, 70,000 women were working for facilities of R.A.A. Many young Japanese women became comfort women for American troops without coercion. Because Japan was extremely poor, Japan was a defeated country. Not enough food, not enough housing. People must survive. I don't blame Americans. Recreation and Amusement Association was a necessary evil. Who needed this evil? First, the U.S. troops needed it. The American military faced the same problem that the Japanese military had faced before. Second, both the U.S. government and the Japanese government needed it. The Japanese government must protect ordinary Japanese women from possible sex crimes by the U.S. troops. The U.S. government wanted to maintain social order of Japan. R.A.A. was a practical solution to this problem. So were comfort stations of the Japanese military. In 1951, Japan concluded the San Francisco Peace Treaty with the United States and other former adversaries. In 1952, Japan became independent again and occupational forces left Japan. But no Japanese women came out and claimed that she was a sex slave of American troops. There never was protest by the Japanese comfort women against the United States. You may wonder why. Because Japanese are honorable people and not shameless people. Japan endured material hardship as well as mental sufferings of a defeated country. We persevered and rebuilt country. It was too shameful for Japanese women to come out and shout, "Hey, we were sex slaves of American soldiers, we were victims, the US should apologize and compensate us." The Japanese women simply didn't do it. Japanese dignity denied this kind of deed. Japanese women endured and overcame grief. Now the United States and Japan are allies, and people of both nations are friendly to each other. Once we were adversaries to each other. We should not forget history. Actually, we cannot forget history. Meanwhile, we should not be prisoners of the past. During World War II, ethnic Koreans were faithful nationals of the Japanese Empire. Even though they were free from conscription, some men volunteered to become soldiers of the Japanese Imperial Armed Forces. In 1942, the recruitment goal of the ethnic Koreans was 4,077. 4,077. Amazingly, 254,273 volunteers applied. Overachievement factor reached 62.4. 62.4. They became brave soldiers. Ethnic Korean soldiers of Japanese armed forces could enjoy services of comfort women, Japanese or Koreans, or of any nationality. Ethnic Koreans were good members of the Japanese Empire. But after World War II, somehow Koreans decided to become victims and started to blame Japan. Quite inconsistent and irrational behavior. Fact versus fabrication. You have already seen the whole picture of the comfort women issue. Koreans successfully conjured up an image of Japanese Imperial Army rampaging through Korean villages, abducting young Korean women, forcing them to become sex slaves. That never took place. That never happened. If a demagogue tells a lie a million times, do you think the lie becomes truth? Never. It's too hypocritical as well as unfair to single out Japan and bash Japan based on fabrication of history. If you are fair, you will never accuse Japan because of comfort women issue. You will never single out and bash Japan because of comfort women issue. You may still say, hey, I understand now, comfort women were professional prostitutes. Yes, but prostitution is no good. I understand you. That's one point. Prostitution is no good. Prostitution is an evil. Yes, you're right. If asked, everyone would say prostitution is an evil. However, on earth, no country has ever abolished prostitution completely. That's reality. That's the history of mankind. We all have to make efforts to get rid of prostitution in every country. Prostitution is an evil. Yes, it is. If so, I don't understand how come some American cities built monumental memorial of comfort women. That monumental memorial is to praise prostitution, is to praise prostitutes. And the message of the monument is nothing but fabrication. In reality, comfort women were professional prostitutes, and 40% of them were Japanese. To Korean anti-Japan activists, let me say a few words. With fabrication of the past, you cannot recover your national pride. With fabrication, you are deceiving yourselves and you are disgracing your history. A nation which cannot squarely face history doesn't have a future. Koreans achieved great things in history. You don't have to deceive yourselves. I truly appreciate your patience to hear me out. My name is Fujii Genki. Thank you again. God bless you all and see you next time.